weekend Q&A. We will be bringing you some history stuff for the next hour or so, talking about whatever historical topics you would like to discuss on the channel, dealing with all of our different comments and questions that you may have about different social studies and historical topics for the next hour or so. We do this every Friday and Saturday night. It's a great way to start your weekend on Friday night and continue it, asking some questions, learning about some history, enjoying the friendly neighborhood historian community, which you can be part of by liking and subscribing. It really helps the channel grow. This is the Friendly Neighborhood History Channel, bringing you quality content relating to history, social studies, geopolitics, past and present, and geography. I am using my new lighting system, and I am actually going to be setting up and using my new microphone system on my new phone here to improve the quality. So hopefully you're able to hear me, and hopefully the audio quality is different. Seth, I'm sorry to hear you're not feeling too well. But yeah, we've got a new lighting system and a new sound system that we're setting up as we do our best to get involved in as much of the YouTube community as possible, as we try to become more and more formal and organized here, and a little bit less, a little more professional, a little less amateur. And so I've got a new microphone for my new phone, and we've got the new lighting system and quality, and it's making things a little bit pop out more, and hopefully everybody's really enjoying that. And I've got the lights turned off, so hopefully that's nice and enjoyable for all of you. I've got the Christmas light going, and yeah, so hopefully this is easier to see and everything. But yeah, next hour or so, Friendly Neighborhood History Channel will be bringing you all the historical content you can enjoy. A little note on our tomorrow on our live stream lecture, we will be moving that back from 1 p.m. Pacific time to, we're going to move it forward to 4 p.m. Pacific time, so 3 hours ahead, something a little bit, or when do we want to do it? 5 p.m. So we're going to be doing it at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time tomorrow night. You will be able to join us for some friendly neighborhood history and some lecturing, and I'll be lecturing on the history of Christmas, some of its traditions and practices, and hopefully you will all find that very, very enjoyable. Actually, we're going to do 3 p.m. Eastern on Sunday, tomorrow. So we're going to move it to an hour earlier than we typically do it. So please join us for some Friendly Neighborhood History live stream lecture, which will hopefully one day become the Friendly Neighborhood History podcast. That's the goal there. But yeah, this is the Friendly Neighborhood History Channel and our live stream Q&A, where you can ask anything. You can ask me, a historian, anything you would like about history, social studies, geopolitics, past and present, social sciences, humanities. That's what we do here every Friday and Saturday night. So if you enjoy learning about that stuff, drop a topic in the chat, like and subscribe. Let's give some love to my wonderful moderator, Simon the Bunny, who was also putting the social media handles in the chat. And please join the channel, become a Friendly Neighborhood Historian. It's easy in liking and subscribing. Can I spell run? I can spell run. R-U-N. Yeah. Hello, Noah. Welcome. Alex, great to see you. Thank you for joining us. Welcome to the Friendly Neighborhood History Channel. Simon and Seth, my wonderful regulars, great to see you. And my wonderful moderator, the great Simon the Bunny, has the social media handles in the chat. So if you want to follow us on social media, feel free to do so using that, and you can see our updated tech that we are doing today. We've got a new microphone, we've got the nice new lighting system, so I don't need lights on at all, and so hopefully really enjoyable. Okay, Cantus, great to see you. No, I don't have a PS5, but it looks like I'm getting the equipment for a PS5. I'm more of a gamer on my personal computer. And I love playing real-time strategy games because a lot of them have a lot of historical-based things like Rome Total War and Empire Earth. Really enjoyable stuff. Thank you. I'm glad you like the Canadian flannel. It's not flannel. It's cotton, so it's soft, but it's not thick. I want something that's wool. Yeah, something like that. Let's see. I'm looking in the chat, seeing. Yeah, I don't have a name. I have a name, but I don't use it freshly wild. I typically try to keep as much quiet as I can about my own personal information. I don't know how to build. I don't know. The Liberation. I don't know about that. That's an interesting show. This topic, this stream is a regular Q&A. So if you have a topic you would like to ask about, please do your best to do so and drop it in the chat, and I will discuss it. I do not know what is the shattering. Sounds like, and yes, give a like, subscribe, all of that stuff. I do my best to be as interactive as possible. And we're here every Friday and Saturday with live Q&A. Ask me anything about history, social studies, social sciences, and the like. And then on Sundays, we have our live stream lecture, which will be moved back an hour, actually, to 3 p.m. Eastern time. Join us tomorrow, where I talk about the history of Christmas and some of its impressive traditions. So, do you know about the remembrances? Again, these sound like movies or series that I may not be familiar with, or even video games that I have not played. So I'm going to get comfortable, sit Indian style, as it used to be called, crisscross applesauce, and just enjoy the chats and what people are bringing up. Can you be a mod, please? I don't know. My moderation is up to Simon. If Simon deems you worthy, then you can definitely be a mod. But I like you being here, Snay, and I hope you have some historical topics you'd like to ask about or learn more about by dropping it in the chat. So, Simon, how's the new sound system and lighting system looking? Yeah, it's a tiny microphone. I want to be able to clip it to my shirt, but I don't want there to be a bunch of background noise because I like to move around. But it's one of those simple ones. You plug it into your phone, and you're connected, and you're good to go. What did law enforcement look like in the early days of the United States? So there is some truth to the notion that early law enforcement was used to enforce fugitive slave acts, but it was usually local and municipal. There wasn't a federal system of crime and punishment like there was. Now there were courts and there was the military, but there was never an FBI until the 1900s. So early colonial and early American judiciary systems relied mainly on municipal and even sometimes state jurisdictions. There was a lot of power in your municipal and local county um, uh, police and justice systems. So yeah, good. I'm glad you like the sound. So that was what it would look like, Seth. So that's a little bit about the law enforcement system. And it's kind of, you've got sheriffs and you did have deputization like we saw in all the Westerns and things like that. But generally, the counties and cities and sometimes the federal government would get involved and sometimes the states would get involved. But widespread state and federal police forces and law enforcement forces only became more common in the last century and a half. Before then, it was local areas that would dole out most of the justice. Oh, that's interesting. So you've got new breeds of duck and waterfowl birds adapting to their environment. That's so cool, Ryan. But Steph, I hope that answers your question about law enforcement in the early United States. Global's asking, is food the major metric for change? War, lack of food. A food can be a major metric for change. People's demands for foods have caused a lot of things. Bread lines and bread riots during World War I, when the Russian government was using all of its resources and rationing as much food as possible so they could give it to the troops on the front line, led to the destabilization of the Tsarist monarchy, which led to the Russian Revolution. So, Global, there's an example of food being a major metric for change. Obviously, it's been more beefed up by Les Miserables and more fantasized, but bread lines and lack of food and the horrible conditions of the poor and the destitute in France in the 1800s led to the revolution in 1831. A famine in the 1770s had destabilized the government of King Louis XVI and helped contribute to the fall of his government with the first French Revolution. So lack of food, lack of easy access to food can lead to revolutions, famines can lead to revolutions, and that can lead to a lot of historical and political changes. So yeah, Global, there's a couple of examples of that. Oh wow, it's freezing in Canada right now. Yeah, superstition is a huge influencer, and superstition has contributed to a lot of our traditions and our practices, such as Christmas. And I was talking about this last night, that the practice of Christmas in its modern form is based on celebrations of the winter solstice, the shortest day of the year, where different cultures and civilizations would have winter festivals where they would band together to be as warm as possible, tell stories, and try to fortify themselves against the cold and enjoy the foods that they had made to keep themselves warm. I love football. And I love your videos, and I love you coming to the channel. What is the next developing country you think will become a developed country and why? Mike, right now, one of the most developing countries in the world is South Africa. South Africa's economy is growing. Its political influence is growing. Its relationship with other countries that are growing, like China and Russia, is also captivating. So I think there's going to be a lot of development in the 21st century of African countries that are becoming more and more economically independent. South Africa, Nigeria, and Ghana are three that I think of. So let me see here. Such as through executing prisoners, arresting them and detaining them, doling out sentences, things like that for different crimes that ultimately belong to the states, and the states were able to subsidiarily give that power to different jurisdictions. So the United States government, Seth, had a particular ability to dole out justice and all of these things, but the states, whatever they didn't explicitly have, the states had, and then whatever they didn't explicitly have that the states didn't cover, they used to create anti-crime organizations, in the Department of Justice, such as the FBI, DEA, and CIA. So there's an example of that. uh, please subscribe, football. I love how you use a soccer emoji for that. um, you can't hear me? Is my microphone going out? Okay, I must have accidentally muted myself. But basically, what I was saying is, it's only more recently that the national government has decided to use its non-enumerated powers to be able to grow a international crime fighting syndicate such as the CIA and the FBI and the DEA, and all of these Department of Justice organizations committed to fighting crime in the United States. At the same time, different states were responsible because the Constitution gave the states the rights to dole out justice because it wasn't enumerated in the Constitution for the federal government to do that. So, according to the U.S. Constitution, especially Amendments 9 and 10 of the Bill of Rights, states are allowed to do whatever they want that is not enumerated power by the federal government. This is to allow the states to remain relatively free. Void, I'll do a flip when you do a flip. So, Google, calm down. Do you remember encyclopedias? Yes, I do love encyclopedias, and I have used them, and I've talked about them. I even made a video because there was recently the anniversary of the Encyclopedia Britannica. So, I mean, could we make an army global of friendly neighborhood historians, a legion? We're trying to hit 6,000 subscribers, so please like and subscribe. Friendly neighborhood historians who wear cotton flannel like this. Yeah. So, yeah, we are headed towards 6,000. That's our goal by the end of the year. Do you think any countries will balkanize in the near future? If so, which ones? Balkanize and will be divided into smaller countries or broken up and stuff like that? No, not necessarily. I think the closest example of this might be in the Middle East, where you have the semaphore in Somaliland and this area. You have the Kurds wanting their own land in Iraq and Syria, and with a new regime in Syria that is ostensibly open to the West, that might become a possibility. And you have the Palestinians and their internal plight to get their own state with their own autonomy, where they don't rely on Israel for their infrastructure. Those areas might balkanize. There might be balkanization in the Middle East in this century, but I'm not sure exactly. But Mike, I love your questions. They're really great questions. Yeah, if you hate history and you're here for the spite of it, then you can ask questions about other things, and I'll do my best to answer them as much as I can. Carol, I'm informing people. You won't believe how much. How much information helps people. I know you've probably never heard this phrase before, but knowledge is power. What's the coolest fact you know that you never got a chance to tell anyone? I don't know, because I try to tell everybody the facts that I know, and they're usually history facts. I'll share one I just learned today, that it was actually not Coca-Cola like we think that invented the modern Santa Claus. I made a video about this, but it was actually a man named Thomas Nast, who was oh, my power go out? Oh, that's interesting. Oops, sorry guys. Turning on my background now. But it was a guy by the name of Thomas Mast, and he had basically and Mass basically decided that he was going to give an image that represented his German culture because German culture was really popular in the 1860s because there was a rise of German immigrants in the United States, and the best way to show German culture in the most positive of lights was to give it was to show one of their traditions, and their Christmas traditions included Papa Noel, who was obviously extraordinarily important in Europe, and therefore, he gave the first depiction of Santa Claus for the Harper's Weekly Gazette in winter of 1863, and that became the standard use for Santa Claus in and that was later adapted and made a little bit and cleaned up a little bit more. But it was an old man with a beard and a red suit, and who was carrying around a bag of toys, and that became the standard that was used later on. So, Captain Fantastic, if that's a fact you did not know and you enjoyed learning about it, please consider liking and subscribing. Sorry for the technical issues. I don't know what's causing that. So let me see. Can I get my light back on? That would be nice if I could get my light back on. Oh, okay. I see what happened. So this is plugged in by a USB, and the laptop that I was servicing with is dead. So that's why that's happening. But yeah, there's some facts about it. Watch the full video on that. Basically, it was from that toy stores and other organizations started using Santa Claus to help sell toys and as a symbol for the holidays. And even Norman Rockwell got involved, putting Santa Claus on the Saturday Evening Post in 1925. And it was in 1930 that Sunburn's Coke came out and basically had the advertisement of Santa that we all know and love today. So let me see here. I think Legion is trademarked by Marvel. Yeah, but then if that was the case, Friendly Neighborhood would be trademarked by Marvel because I got my name from Spider-Man. He's the Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man. This is the Friendly Neighborhood History channel. So, Palestine is gone. Well, I mean, what do you mean by that? Palestine there still is a Palestine. There are still Palestinians. There's still the West Bank. There's still plenty of space for Palestinians in the world. When was the last time I was there? The last time I read about it. Why do people only feel connected to the last 3 generations and forget there was hundreds of ancestors? Because people might have only lived in their lives, might remember their grandparents or even their great grandparents, and it's as far back as we can remember, and that's how we connect. And so we connect to our loved ones that we know through studying their lives and studying their culture. And a lot of people aren't even connected to the generation of their parents, let alone other generations. They only know about these things in theory or an idea. So it's not as they're not as connected as you might think. Global. Want to know a paper joke? I can't. It's terrible. You did the terrible joke again. That's hilarious. Thomas Mass has finally been recognized and is showing his support by turning off the lights. Yes, that might very well be it. But it's NAST, I think. NAST. COVID will be the hot topic for our grandchildren. Yeah, Simon, I expect COVID to be in history textbooks for students probably starting in the 2030s. This is something that everybody is going to be able to say where they were when the shutdowns came, what their life was like during the shutdowns, what COVID was like, and how it changed the world. It's one of those things that's going to be interviewed about. I'm going to be interviewed about it as an old man, giving an oral history, which is a huge part of history where we discuss the past by interviewing people who lived through it in a regular experience. And so I think that all of us, to some extent, will be part of that oral history when it comes to COVID. Yeah, it is a little bit like that. Thank you. Yes, we fixed the power. We've got the microphone going. It just seems like the lights are not going because the computer needs to be charged. So I'm going to have to plug it in a second. We all read those books. Tell us something we don't know. How do you like them apples? If you want to learn something you don't know, Carol, please watch one of my 5 and 15 videos or what did you know videos where I go into great detail about things or quick facts about things that you probably don't know anything about. Here's something you may not know. Lincoln actually did not want to free the slaves when he was elected president. This is the one I always go to. He wanted to keep slavery in the South, but keep it from spreading to the Western territories. The South misinterpreted him and were so terrified of him that they swore off him and seceded. I'm not reading anything. I'm reading what you say. I'm not regurgitating that. I'm regurgitating what you say because I'm reading it and then I'm saying why it's wrong. I'm not a hockey fan per se, but I mean, I know I look like it right now, especially. Hockey is very interesting. I've done videos about hockey. More of a basketball and football guy, and American football, by the way. Streaming always has some kind of technical issue. The fact that we can in real time share and interact with video and text is amazing. Yep. Um, can you, uh-huh. Carol, please ask us a question about a historical topic. I'm glad you're here, Simon. I always love it when we have people who are wanting to challenge. Um, Shanning, wow, congratulations on that, Dr. Shanning. Thank you for joining us. I'm very honored that you're here. Um, yeah, interesting. Historical around gap tooth people like myself. That's interesting. I'm just waiting on the money to come in from YouTube, and then I'm going to get Invisaligns. It's that simple. Um, yes, Ryan, I've heard about this. The economic growth, the economic stagnation in Canada is terrible. Twice as many people are leaving Canada as are going in there right now. And the devaluation of Canada's dollar to the U.S. dollar is disproportionate, and Canada may need annexation by the United States to actually continue as an entity. Um, yep, it's going to happen, Seth, and it's going to happen before you're 72. Oh, the wife of Bath. You're referring to to Chaucer's Canterbury Tales. Interesting. Um, no, Goku, that's not true. Lincoln did not want a wage slavery is not employment. That's like wage slavery is an oxymoron, first of all, because employment means wages mean payment, and slavery means forced labor, and that isn't and that means no payment. So that's an oxymoron. Why do they only push two parties in politics? Because there are more candidates. Is it because they have the most money? Yes, the most money and the most political clout and the most history. The Democrats have been around for almost 2 centuries now, created by Andrew Jackson in the 1820s and 30s, based on his principles of of individual rights, manifest destiny, and basically uh, the individual over the state. And the Republicans have been together since the 1850s, created as the party to end slavery and its spread in the Western territories, which was the platform Lincoln ran on in the 1860s. And because the Republicans were the only dominant party in the 1860s, because the Democrats fell out of power because of the Civil War, the Republicans were able to build a huge conglomerate and get a lot of influence and money. And the Democrats, seen as the party of the common man throughout most of their history, have always been the party to court the immigrant vote, have always been the party to court the vote of minorities and people who are underdogs, and that is starting to change now. But basically, the Republicans and the Democrats have been able to monopolize certain fields and demographics of voters, and been able to build their politics, build their political machines because of they've been able to create people who are generationally loyal to their party and able to give them large amounts of money. So. Uh, Yeah, Simon. I'm not saying that I want the United States to annex Canada. I love Canada, and I think Canada is a beautiful country. I'm saying that there are social and economic issues happening in Canada right now, and their politics are extraordinarily uncertain. And so the United States may need to get involved in some way, shape, or form there, or they may want annexation. Or a lot of Canadians might come in favor of annexation. I'm not saying annexation is a good idea, but yeah. Uh, Yes, the illusion of freedom. I understand. Yes, I love that. That's just great. Why do you call it the illusion of freedom? Um, they were fed and housed because they needed to be used for wage to work. Yeah. No, Steph, I get where you're coming from. Oh, Gem and Lake. I love Coke more than Pepsi, and I can tell the difference between the two, and I don't need to do the test. I think they're actually very different, and I like Pepsi, but I love Coke. Got to go with Coke, and besides, Santa Claus drinks Coke, so you should too. What type of men are you into? Historical men, for the most part. Can you tell is ruining our perspective of history? We take credit for everything, every ancient empire. AK, do you mean the United States? Because nationalism, even nationalist historians, even people who are flag waving Americans in their historical perspectives, do not take credit. They might. I think you're flipping it around. a lot of people who want to push Americanism and want to push America being this great place will constantly talk about how other countries, how the United States got its ideas from the Greeks and the Romans and the Judeo-Christian ethics, which is partially true, but that is not. But they're not taking. The United States isn't taking credit for ancient empires and things like that. And anyone who's doing that is not a historian. They're being irresponsible. And nationalism can be dangerous when you start to rewrite history using it. And we saw that with the Nazis. And and I'm not putting it past any American to do that. I'm sure there are plenty that have. But the truth of the matter is, I don't see that as much. Let me see here. Let me see here. Okay. Ryan said, I don't think it's that controversial, Simon. Canadians want Trudeau out. Yeah, Trudeau is in a lot of trouble right now. Yeah. Michael, thank you. I took that breath. I appreciate you checking in on my health. And I got to make sure I flip over so I get all the comments and not just the top messages. Okay, let me see here. Going back. Thank you, everyone, for joining us and being here. Please like and subscribe. Show some love to my moderators. I'm in the bunny, and follow those social media handles that are in the chat. Where am I on the chat? Let me see. Okay. Jamin Lake is saying Republicans against slavery, Democrats started the KKK. That's true. The Democrats started the KKK as a terrorist wing of their party, trying to terrorize and disenfranchise black voters in the South. When the KKK was put down by President Grant in the 1860s and 70s, basically, after the first massive wave of the KKK was put down, it kind of went underground a little bit and then resurged in the late 1800s, hating more on Jews and Catholics as well as African Americans. And basically, it was a way for terrorist activity. But once they regained political power in the South in the 1870s with the end of Reconstruction, the Democratic Party, the Dixiecrats as they came to be known later on, these Democrats who were conservative in the sense they wanted to conserve the old white man's antebellum self and glorify it and come up with nonsense like the Lost Cause myth. You talk about nationalism, rewriting history there. Those people did everything in their power to disenfranchise African Americans, and they didn't need to use violence anymore. They just turned the other way when violence was committed, such as lynchings, and did everything in their power to make blacks as weak as possible. Which is why many blacks fled north, which is why cities like Detroit, Philadelphia, Baltimore, and Washington, D.C., Chicago have huge African American populations when they weren't originally heavily populated by African Americans. Washington, D.C. and Baltimore did have slaves, so there was a decent amount of African Americans, but cities like Detroit and Chicago that had limited or no slavery in their own history became populated by African Americans with African American neighborhoods in the 1910s and 20s during what's called the Great Migration. And the best example of this is Harlem, which was the center of black culture and learning in New York City. Elon is president. Yes, Elon carries a great amount of weight. Speaking of Africans. Let me see here. Hello, everyone here. Thank you I'm new to your channel and scrolling by. Well, I'm glad you're here, amazing, energetic Joshua. We're happy to have you. What do you know about the social structure of the Knox Society? The Knox Society. Are you referring to the people of South America, of South America? I was going to say the Incas. Something we don't know when we talk about the Incas and the Aztecs and their history is that both the Inca and the Aztecs were relative newcomers, and their kingdoms and empires only lasted for about a century before they were destroyed by the revolutionary Indians who were helped by the Spanish. But the Nok people were an early group of people, I believe, living in that region of the world. I might be confusing them with the No people, N-O-H. But I don't know a huge amount about them. But I think those are the people in South America, in Peru and Venezuela, and modern day Bolivia and Colombia before other groups like the Incas came. I don't know about that choice. I'm not a politician. We're not. So Dr. Pepper is really good. Dr. Pepper is actually based on soda. Cream sodas, which were common in the late 1800s and early 1900s. Um, Yeah, that Santa is technically is Saint Nicholas of Myra, who was a Greco-Turkish Christian bishop in the early 4th century, who was known for his charity, particularly to the poor, and was known for making toys for children and giving them out and things like that. He also punched out a guy who denied the divinity of Jesus at the Council of Nicaea. So some interesting geopolitics and interesting theology going on with old Saint Nicholas. We talked about Tony. If you are interested in learning more about wokeism and its history, check out the live stream from last weekend because we talked about that a lot. Um, what time was you planning to start keeping it real? Well, we start keeping it real here every Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time when we start taking questions from you wonderful people, and then Sundays and Saturdays at 7 p.m. when we continue the Q&A for its second part, and then Saturdays, and then Sundays, usually at 1 o'clock Pacific time, we do our live stream lecture where I talk about historical topics that interest me. Tomorrow, I'm moving that back to noon. So it's an hour earlier. It's 3 on the East Coast. And then on Monday, I am doing a makeup one. I think I'll probably do it at 1 p.m. Pacific time, where I am discussing the Roman Republic. I didn't get to do that last week because I had the flu. For example, Indians take pleasure in ancient India. Okay, not a you say, AK. For example, Indians take pleasure in ancient India and Indus, but the cultural differences are so significant. Are we even the same as our ancestors? Well, we're same in the fact that we're humans. We need shelter. We need comfort. We want luxury. We want love. So our human nature hasn't fundamentally changed, but the way we engage with other humans and the way we engage that nature has changed to some degree, AK. So I will say that. I think there is a difference between the Indus River people and modern Indians, but I think they one of the things that is not different, which is pretty incredible about India, if you're talking about them specifically, is the practice of Hinduism and the popularity of Hinduism as a way of life, as a way to deal with the suffering and death cycles that we see that life seems to be that consist of, no matter how many lives you've lived through. So, AK, the truth of the matter is what has kept India India and what has made India so amazing in its history, and you can trace it down the line, is the predominance of Hinduism in that society. So the nationalist movement in India right now is really doing its best under Hamadi to go back to that ancient India and those ancient customs and practices and ideas. So. Um, Anyways, how is Christmas season going in UK? Okay, did Coca-Cola steal their secret ingredient, the cola plant, from African slaves after slavery ended to keep their money flow with cocaine addiction? Coca-Cola, I believe there's some truth to that. They did have cocaine in it early on, but when it was banned in the 1930s, it changed. So, let me see. Yes, I'm doing a little bit of a chiaroscuro, that like Caravaggio would do, who is one of my favorite artists. So amazing, energetic Joshua. I'm glad you brought that up. You don't think it's possible that the Dems tricked everyone into thinking they're the good guys with a secret agenda to screw them? I'm not going to get involved in is the Democratic Party now the party of the 1860s. I think what is interesting, and I will say this from in a geopolitical perspective as an American, is that the Democratic Party, which has become very much influenced by a lot of critical theory and woke ideology, which usually includes a lot of apologizing and reminiscing on the sins of the past, is extremely quiet and has been extremely quiet about its own history and not acknowledging its racist past and things like that. Instead, choosing to broad brush the entire idea with their argument that has become very popular of the side switched, that the Republicans of the 1850s and 60s would be Democrats today, and that the Democrats then would be Republicans. And that has been how they explain all of that. But they're still technically Democrats. And they want America to own up to its faults with Native Americans. They want white people to own up to their faults with slavery, even if they never owned a slave. They want men to own up to their faults towards women, straight towards gay, all of these different things, especially more people on the left of the Democratic Party. But they don't want to own up to the past of the Democratic Party itself. This is the party of slavery, Jim Crow, discrimination, the Confederacy, the Revolution. I mean, what's the joke everyone says? The Democrats haven't been this mad since we took away their slaves. Um, and that's really, really cute and funny, and it may not be fully historically accurate. But if that is a huge preoccupation, apologizing and making reparations for the past, then maybe the Democratic Party would do well to start with itself. I'm not, I'm making a criticism based on their own, what I find to be their own political philosophy and political logic. So I'm not saying by any stretch of the imagination that they're the exact same Democratic Party, because parties do change. I don't know if a party's necessarily flipped, but they've obviously changed. The Republicans are advocating and practicing very differently than they did in the 1860s and 70s, and so are the Democrats. The Democratic Party is also the party of civil rights, and had a predominance over that with presidents like Kennedy and Johnson. But at the same time, if they're going to look into the history, they're going to really lean into that, then they might want to acknowledge their own past. Planned Parenthood acknowledged that Margaret Sanger, who founded Planned Parenthood, was a fan of eugenics and was quoted by the Nazis. And they've been very transparent about that in recent years, in acknowledging their own history. When many of their apologists and advocates have tried desperately to take Sanger away from that equation, Planned Parenthood has been very forthright. And I think the Democratic Party, one of the biggest benefactors of Planned Parenthood, might do well to take a lesson from their contributor. So, just my thoughts there. I'm glad you liked and subscribed. I really appreciate it. Oh, yes. So Vanoa was who I was thinking of. Vanoc civilization of Nigeria in 1500 BC. I don't know a huge amount about them. Like many African civilizations, their culture was built pyramidically, like you see in India and Egypt and Mesopotamia. So there was a sense of ancient. They're obviously an ancient people. And what is huge to almost every African civilization, no matter what, no matter where it is on the continent, is trade. Trade makes Africa move. Trade makes Africa grow. If you study any African kingdom or any ancient African culture, particularly sub-Saharan Africa, south of the Sahara, or in the Sahara Desert, not North Africa or the Maghreb as it's sometimes called, those countries tend to have a predilection towards trade and towards the distribution of goods. And so the Nok civilization is no different. Interesting, Ryan. I played Battlefield 2 when I was growing up. I never played Battlefield 1. I'll have to. I never could get into Battlefield 3 either, or 4. Waco. Oh, the home of Dr. Pepper. That's really cool. And Texas Christian University. Yeah, Krampus, the anti-Santa. That's so cool, Seth. And yes, the moderators are amazing. Simon's here all the time. We love Simon and the moderations here. Yeah, it's a movie classic now. Hollywood loves to capitalize on anything. I mean, they made a movie about Santa Claus literally writing based on a contract so they could make a pun off of Claus, and it made Tim Allen huge. So there you got that. Yes, I'm looking forward to having you there, Spartacus, Sunday at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Yeah, we always get trolls. It's what happens, Simon. Yeah, I need to watch their special and their Krampus. Some groups of people save skulls. Is this an honor as if a memory lives? Yes, it's a way to show respect. The Native Americans, the Sioux Nation, when they collected the remains of their enemy, they would cut off their fingers and toes. And they did this at the Battle of the Little Bighorn, but when they got to George Armstrong Custer to show him respect, they only cut off his pinky, interestingly enough. And scalps were the way many Native Americans would collect. There's something about the head, the brain, all the cranium, the place of the eyes and the nose and the mouth and what we say. Throughout different human cultures and societies, you see trends and patterns that are the same, such as the building of pyramids or legends of giants. Well, one of the common tropes and trends is the importance of the human skull, of preserving the skull. I mean, in Egyptian culture with the mummies, they made burial masks and painted them over so that would be the face for the afterlife. And they did that more elaborately than anything else when designing the sarcophagus and the mummy and the coffin, because that really, really mattered. And yes, collecting the skulls. I mean, shrunken heads where mummification, things like this are common all over the world because people love the head. If you look at the Bible, David kills Goliath, he decapitates him after he knocks him out. That's a very famous story there. So the importance of having a head on a platter, like John the Baptist, another story from the Bible, this time the New Testament. Um, Beheading as a form of punishment, of execution. There's something that is about the skull, about honoring the skull or desecrating it, um, punishing the head, cutting off the head, that matters throughout all different societies at all different times. So, um, I apologize. Give me my thumbs up now. Um, yes, that could be it. Um, they are the party of the KKK, and all white people may not have owned slaves, but the majority of white people went along with the system. So, yes, a lot of them did. If you look at so Shannon, I'm glad you brought that up. In the South, in southern part of the United States, the vast majority of people could not own a large plantation or even multiple slaves. Most people in their lifetimes, at max, would have between 1 and 5 slaves. And then the very, very rich were able to build plantation systems in the deep South, and most other people might own a slave or two, but there were long periods of their lives where they owned no slaves, and many people didn't own slaves at all, and many of the poorest of the poor did very little better than slaves, as did immigrants and wage laborers, making very, very poor dirt wages in the North compared to slaves, were just only a step or two above it. As is the case in any society with slaves, peasants are typically doing little better. Um, so, uh, yeah. Is there a possible co-stream? Oh, that would be wonderful. If we could ever meet and get together, then we would definitely co-stream together, something like that. Maybe a little bit like if we ever do the Friendly Neighborhood podcast, we'd have to figure out arrangements around that. But yeah, I would love to do that, Ryan. And if you love what I've been talking about, and you love the history you're learning about, and you love learning about shrunken heads, and you love learning about what people have done with skulls, and everything else I've been talking about, like and subscribe, and it really helps the channel grow. I really appreciate it. The goal is 6,000, a legion of friendly neighborhood historians by the end of the year. You can be part of that legion if you like and subscribe. And also another question, as many questions as you want, AK. I love it when people ask multiple questions. And also another question, it's clear Russia will win. Kursk is falling and the Ukrainians are retreating. What is the future of Ukraine now? Putin said the other day that he is open to negotiations without any preconditions, meaning that he is open to going to the table and negotiating a peace where he doesn't get to keep this land, because he knows that he's going to continue to have to deal with pressure from Europeans. He knows that this is the only thing maintaining his economic system. And really, the only thing he demanded was that Zelensky stand for election, because Zelensky has not stood for re-election during the course of this thing. The same people who are demanding that Netanyahu in Israel stand for re-elections and in the war, and he must not be ending the war because he is trying to stay in power, have not been nearly as interrogative of Zelensky as they should be, when realizing that he might be very well doing the same thing, perpetuating the war so that he can stay in power. I'm not saying he is. I'm not saying Netanyahu is. I'm simply saying that one of the demands that Putin is making is that the Ukrainians hold an election, and he's willing to forego all territorial demands or concessions the Ukrainians would have to give into in order to make that happen. So who knows? I think we are getting close to the end of this war, and it may not be as bad for the Ukrainians as possible. And I don't know that they would be considered the losers at the end of this war. It all depends what happens at the negotiation table. Um, yes, Shannon, there was compensation of that. There is, but I think that the reparations issue only opens up another can of worms for all of the people who were not here, who have no connections to slavery, and for all of all the blacks whose ancestors owned slaves as well. There's a lot going on there, and there wasn't proper compensation and reparation during their lifetimes, and that is a huge reason why. 40 acres and a mule never really happened. The Freedmen's Bureau didn't have enough time, because Reconstruction was cut short in the South, to be able to get what they needed to get. Uh, to some extent, Jeff, it is, but it's also based on culture and the development of religious practices, and something that unifies people. Basically, civilization is a unifying force, and therefore it needs certain things like religion, like a priestly class, like a ruler, like a military, to unify it. I often make a distinction, Jeff, between a united civilization in the ancient world, where you have, like the Egyptians, where they have one king ruling over all the land. Although it wasn't like that at first, like what Menes started to do in 2700 BC, and the Mesopotamians, who in their earliest days, especially the Sumerians, were not united, and they had city-states. It wasn't until men like Sargon of Akkad and Hammurabi that they started to develop coalesced civilizations. They have the same religion and the same practices and the same language, but they and the same trade network and the same monetary system and the same bartering system, but they didn't have one ruler over all the land. And the Greeks didn't have that either. The Romans did. The Egyptians did in ancient world. So, hi, Chill. Great to see you. We're halfway through. Oh, we're halfway through. Oh gosh, I'm 15 minutes behind. Now that North Korea has joined the war, what does that mean as far as the conflict, in your opinion, Professor? I appreciate you calling me that. That's so sweet of you. I love it when people call me that. The North Korean army is not prepared and has not done a good job fighting or backing up the Russians, but it does create that possibility of a world war. It could be more of a paper tiger put out there to say this war could continue and get really, really bad. So, Baylor is in Waco. Okay, Baylor is in Waco. I'm sorry, Shannon. And Fort Worth, that's where TCU is. Yeah, Baylor is in Waco. Let's see, Native Americans and Germans scalp people. Yeah, right. It's common. The German barbarians would scalp the Romans, yes, and the Native Americans would scalp and would pay people to scalp for them. And death masks are common too. People have an obsession with death. The ancient Egyptians, perhaps more than anyone else. Well, Shannon, we'll have to make that happen someday because I'm going to be a doctoral student. I'm going to need to do some research. So please stay in touch with the channel. Please like and subscribe. I'd like to make a Discord or something a little more private, maybe even a WhatsApp for friendly neighborhood historians so that we can all connect a little bit more and so that you guys can interact with me there and it's not just at the live streams. Oh, thank you. Amazing interject, Joshua. I'm so glad you were here. I know you probably left, but I really appreciate all the great stuff you brought up in the channel. Go help your friend out. History can be rough. There's a lot of non-pretty stuff, and that's why I try to make it as palpable and digestible as possible. That is the job of the Friendly Neighborhood History channel. Let me see. Going through. You're putting on Krampus on TV. I love it. Can you buy a decent mic? I just bought this one, and I think it's pretty nice so far. So, super chat you a microphone. I'll have more equipment. I want to get a studio. I want to get all of those bells and whistles if we could get on a large stage, and I want to turn my live stream lectures into the Friendly Neighborhood podcast. So, yes, slavery could be rented. That's definitely true. Yeah, I'm not my best today. I need a haircut and I need a shave, but I'm doing what I can. What is the future of Syria? I have no idea because I've heard so many mixed reports about who these rebels actually are. I would like to think this is the beginning of a period of change. I just don't see the Kurdistanis getting their own, the Kurds getting their own Kurdistan. I don't see balance in the Middle East. I don't see the Syrians becoming a peaceful people that really stand up to Iran. I just don't see it, but I don't know what's going to happen. I think I do my best to not make predictions, but I think people ignore the truth about slavery and what their slaves went through because they can't stand the pain of it and wish for the part of American history to be erased. They do. But it's interesting to me, Shannon, that if you look at self-criticism of a culture, it's predominant in the West. It's a Western, the ideas, the ethical ideals, the morality, the moralism that comes from a lot of this self-criticism is only available in the West. The Saudi Arabians do not talk about the sins of the Muslim past. You don't see this kind of dialect in India. You don't see it in Russia. You see people you see political dissidents and religious dissidents, but there's something that is unique about, if there's anything that's unique about the West, in my opinion, it's the ability to criticize itself. Yeah, that's true. And I love watching British Parliament, Canadian Parliament because of the yelling across the sides. It's fun for me. Do you think the Nazis lost when they lost at Kursk, or they never had a chance against the U. They had a chance against the USSR. They didn't have a chance against both. Hitler declaring war on the United States was a stupid, foolish mistake. He bit off more than he could chew, as did the Japanese when they attacked Pearl Harbor. I mean, that's what Yamamoto said. Um, and that is true. Africans were selling each other for a long time before they had ever seen a white person, and they were selling each other to the Arabs. So again, something that we don't see in Arabia, something we don't see in African countries, is this self-critique of their ancient slavery systems. We do see mass slavery and human trafficking in Africa, unfortunately, to this day. However, um, does North Korea helping Russia in the conflict change the outcome, or do you think it won't matter? No, I don't think that they're strong enough to do so. Let me see here. Jeff, a small amount of North Korean troops are not going to, it's to show that North Korea will help the Russians and the Russians can get help from outside, and that there is another axis. There is another counter example of power other than the United States and their Western allies. Why people always had a religion? That's a great question. I think religion has a civilizing effect, and I think civilization needs religion, and religion needs civilization. I think people have this worry about what happens to them after they die, and I think it's natural to wonder, and I think they need a system that is comforting, that can give them answers as to why things they do not understand scientifically are happening to them. And that is why you have a god of the moon. And if the god of the moon is angry, that's why the tides are the way they are. That's why you have flooding. That's why you have things like this. I think that if your crops are dry and the sun is unbearably hot, Ra must be very angry at you. Or if you are growing weight, or if you are doing well in war and you are doing well in our agriculture, it's because Dagon, the fish god of the sea peoples, the Philistines, of the Canaanites, he has looked upon you and smiled. So the truth, although he may not have been a fish god, but the truth of the matter is, I think there is this polytheistic religions explain the way the world works to people who do not understand it. Monotheistic religions tend to have an all-causal being who is responsible for the running of the world, but also has given humans some level of autonomy in their own decisions. And it gives humans a feeling of purpose and meaning, that they have something to look forward to, not just in this life, but in the next one. And what is longer than eternity? And that is why Islam, Judaism, and Christianity, and any other monotheistic religion, are able to comfort one another with those words. So, do you like wine gummies? Interesting, wine gummies. I'll have to try that. Shanning, America has paid reparations to the Japanese natives and pretty much to the Jews. Reparations should only go to those who can trace their roots back to the Emancipation Proclamation. Yes, I would agree to that to some extent, Shannon. I think that's a solid way to look at it. The Japanese are mainly alive, who were paid reparations were mainly alive when those atrocities occurred. The natives, there has been the offer of reparations. They haven't always been taken up. And I don't know if I would say the Jews received explicit reparations from the United States. They received, I think, support for Israel has been a recompense for the Holocaust by more than just the United States. Do you like Supreme? I don't know what that is. Yes. What I find interesting in flavor is that coffee in the Middle East and Africa is extremely strong. Coffee in East Asia is sweet and enjoyable, and the Chinese and the Vietnamese love their coffee sweet. It's an American custom and a Middle Eastern custom to drink it black. And I want to go to Turkey, not just for the amazing history and beautiful sights, but also because they have coffee and they drink it, and it sticks to your teeth. The espresso there is extremely strong. I want chewing coffee. Yeah, South Korea is having a lot of problems right now, Jeff, and I see that a lot. And the removal of their president after these different votes, there's a lot of problems with the parliamentary system in South Korea, and there's a lot of questions. And South Korea seems to go back and forth between being free and open and honest, and being corrupt and politically motivated, and that has been its history ever since inception. Um, I'm a lumberjack and I'm okay, Chris. The French begrudgingly accept being in Canada. It's more fun for them to whine and push their issues than they really want, like someone complaining. Yeah, I don't know about that, but that's very, very funny. Um, Watchmen, the Quran teach to kill the enemy. Yes, that's true. And I have to qualify that so does the Old Testament. I mean, which is the Jewish holy book and part of the Christian holy book. But what the problem is that the reason we know this so much more is that Islam has a particular problem with this right now that both Jews and Christians have kind of figured out not to have anymore. Um, yes. So yes, help us get monetized. And that Monty Python reference is always funny. I mean, one of my favorite lines of all time as a historian: "No one expects the Spanish Inquisition." Slavery was common from the time of Egypt. In fact, slavery goes back before Egypt. Slavery predates civilization. Interestingly enough, there's some evidence of groups basically stealing ancient goods from other peoples based on the artifacts we found and taking prisoners. So that's interesting. And slavery is almost always a casualty of war. Um, what made American slavery unique was that it was chattel slavery, and it was bondage for life, and it was generational, and it was race-based, which all of those had existed, but not all of those had existed together before. Countries with high per capita income are mostly theistic and more happy, and countries like Afghanistan are the polar opposite. Just how do you? Yes, I think there's some truth to that. High economic success and fortitude, sociologically, we have seen it corresponds with two things: declining birth rates and declining church attendance. So Western Europe and the United States, as they became more affluent, became less church going, and their native people especially, had fewer and fewer children. The reason why Africans stopped selling people to Europe is because they didn't know the form of slavery was horrible, and then colonialism in Africa. Shannon, that's not fully true. That's partly true. The part of the reason was the abolishing of slavery by the French and the British, and they actually did everything they could to keep the Ottomans and others from trading. They actually would capture ships that were carrying slaves that the Ottomans had sent. Um, they didn't know how barbaric it was, and they hated that. But colonialism in Africa is a huge reason that it is. So you are right there. Um, Otter, great to see you. Wonderful. It's been a while. Watch the documentary on Battle of Messina. Wow, can you talk a little bit about it and its impact in World War One? I don't know much about the Battle of Messina. So I'm thinking of Messina when Patton defeated Montgomery in that race there famously. Today is also the death anniversary, as I do those types of videos on the channel, of George S. Patton. Uh, but yeah. Uh, Let me see here. So religion was I don't know. I'd have to look into that about Messinas. I don't know about World War One battles as much as I do World War Two. Religion was IMP, but now do you think it's worth to believe in myths? I wouldn't say about myths necessarily. I never said that religion is all myths. I said the reason people believe in religion and look to religion. Who is the real God? Yours. There. Shanning said, throughout history in the air, this isn't a religious channel. I talk about religion in the context of social studies and history. Throughout history in the Arab world, there were instances of slaves rising to positions of power, most notably through military service, where most slaves, like the Mamelukes, are a good example of this. They actually overthrow the Egyptian government, create their own. Saladin is an example of this. The Ayyubid dynasty. He came from rags to riches, basically. And of course, the Janissaries, despite being of European origin, could rise in political ranking and become very influential, either as elite soldiers, advisors, or as eunuchs in the Sultan's harem in the Ottoman Empire. So that's very true. There are examples throughout history of slaves rising in distinction and power, but I would say that happened in the United States too, especially after slavery was ended. Um, and I would say that there are many important Americans who you can't learn the story of America about without their influence and power, and that's with them being former slaves. Frederick Douglass and Harriet Tubman are great examples of this. Um, so the Arab world didn't practice chattel slavery like America. That's not fully true. If a slave became Muslim, he could be freed. But the reason they enslaved Africans was because Africans Muslims cannot enslave other Muslims, so they went and enslaved other people. One of the reasons that Western Africa converted voluntarily to Islam was that they were afraid of enslavement. The Ghana and the Mali and the Songhai people. It is super hard to get reparations as a native because it's hard to prove a tribe you came from, as it has to be signed off by. Yes, I can imagine that it'd be a very hard and arduous process, and any bureaucratic organization makes it more difficult. And the Bureau of Indian Affairs I find to be laughable only because we've had that bureau for 150 years and it has done no good for Native Americans. Um, um, it's corrupt. Most Korean leaders in jail. Yep, that sounds about right to me. Um, I don't know if I saw it, Seth. I'm sorry. I apologize if I didn't see it. Please put it in the chat again. And we are coming up to the hour mark. So that means I'm actually catching up on the chat. I reside in Puerto Rico, and we have Arabica coffee. The rumor has it that Christopher Columbus planted it when he discovered the island in 1493. But I think we export any we consume what we grow. But I don't think we. Yeah, I don't know if Columbus brought Arabica coffee. I don't believe Columbus would have had that. Um, there actually are. The truth is, the Europeans did get coffee, and well, from what I understand, coffee. The Europeans get most of first encountered it here. But they also, I mean, tea was what they got in trading with the Indians and the Chinese, especially the British. It wasn't but chattel slavery doesn't necessarily have to be generational. Oh, what were you asking? Oh, you were asking about the Waco massacre, David Koresh and the Branch Davidians, a religious cult offshoot of the Seventh-day Adventists who were hunted down by the American government in the 1990s and unwisely killed by Janet Napolitano and the FBI. That Waco, Texas? I did see that question. Yeah, slavery in the Western world was generational, but hadn't necessarily been that way and didn't necessarily start off that way. It wasn't that they decided that was exactly how it was going to be when the Portuguese were first gifted African slaves. Let me see here. Okay. Bye, Ryan. Great to see you. I'm so glad you're here. Enjoy the Krampus. What Patton handled Sicily was kind of interesting. Uh-huh. That sounds like something that Patton would do. Not very tolerant for Montgomery. And Montgomery had done some nasty stuff during the war himself. Oh, wow. They used mines under the German camp. Well, that's World War I for you. Use the technology of the last century from the Industrial Revolution to kill as many people as you possibly can, indiscriminate of how nasty it is. And that's why the Geneva Convention was born. That's true, Mason. And there's slavery still going on to this world. Oh, wow. Well, Shannon, so great to see you. Please keep coming back. I really love all your knowledge, and you know a great deal, probably more than I do on a lot of things. So we're happy to have you here. Was this FBI? I believe it was both of them working together. It was a compound that they had built. The Arabs before Islam had black slavery. That's true. Yes. And we've finally gotten all the way to the end and just in time for an hour. So AK is asking, was the invasion of Iraq justified? Saddam not being in power was just good for humanity. WMDs were alive, though. Well, the truth of the matter is, was it good for humanity? Because look at the aftermath. Look at the power vacuums. Look at how weak and unstable Iraq has been. And look at the rise of the Islamic State and Caliphate there and what ISIS did in the 2010s. And I think that I've talked about this a lot on the channel, and I think it's a historical lesson the U.S. and the West have to painfully learn. But basically, there's nothing. They didn't solve anything by overthrowing Saddam Hussein. There were no WMDs, as far as we know. But getting rid of a dictator doesn't necessarily make things better. Today is the anniversary of the Lockerbie massacre, where Flight 103, at the behest of the terrorists in Libya under Muammar Gaddafi, blew up a plane and killed 270 people, and it crashed in Lockerbie, Scotland. And they didn't admit it was them until 15 years later. And a lot of people, hopefully in the chat, will remember that. But Gaddafi had already been weakened by Reagan and then later by George W. Bush. And by the time he was overthrown, there was no reason to overthrow him. Yes, he was a brutal dictator and he did a lot of things that he shouldn't have. But what was the replacement? And that is the question that no one ever properly answered for the Shah in Iran. And look at what Iran has become since he was overthrown. No one answered that for Saddam in Iraq. Look at how Iraq is doing. No one answered that for Assad. And we'll see what happens there. No one answered that about the democratic government in Afghanistan that was toppled and replaced by the Taliban, the same entity that ran the country when the United States was went there in the first place. No one asked that question about Libya, answered that question about Libya when Gaddafi was overthrown. No one asked about Mubarak, and the military got back in control of Egypt, taking it away from CAIR and the Muslim Brotherhood. So nobody has an answer to what happens now. The replacement can be worse than what is being replaced. Yes, let me see here. Mason, Monty is a hard topic. He was extremely rude. Most modern historians now believe he was somewhere on the autistic spectrum, going by accounts of people who knew him. Yeah, and brusque and all of that. But so was Patton. These guys were just egos clashing. Hi to you. How do you know so much if it is not me? If I'm not subbing, I'm just asking. Thank you for answering. Well, I'm glad you asked. I really appreciate that. I mean, I love history. I do my best to keep my memory sharp and try to bring as much friendly history to you as possible. And if you enjoy that, like and subscribe. Otter, it's great to see you. Merry Christmas to you if I don't see you. That's a beautiful question. Thank you for asking, Elabelle. If we don't see you again, we shall call for a search party. Yes, I would be worried to see that. Gaddafi, I remember how we celebrated this in social studies class. Don't people wish he was back? I heard this. Yeah, people didn't know what was going to happen with the Arab Spring, just like they didn't know what was going to happen when the Shah was overthrown. When the Shah of Iran was overthrown, the United States should have learned its lesson then that in the Middle East, you can't just overthrow a government, you have to have a good replacement. Basically, a lot of liberal and leftist college students in Iran, along with some communist forces and secularists and Democrats, people wanting democracy, had overthrown his government, but they were working with radical Muslims who thought Iran had become too much like the West. Those people commandeered the revolution and took it over under Ayatollah Khomeini, and that led to Iran and its basically 13th century style society now that is a huge sponsor of international and domestic terrorism. So it's who do you replace it with? The Shah was a dictator. He repressed his people. Their lives were miserable. Their lives are arguably worse now. They're poorer. Women have less rights. Gays are existentially in danger. And Western education is just not allowed. So any of the things that brought freedom to other parts of the world, like to India and Vietnam, Ho Chi Minh and Gandhi both being educated in Western universities, doesn't exist in Iran today. Mm-hmm. Yeah, the battle was basically in between the British and U.S. sector, and he took over command. Yeah, and he didn't do that good of a job of it, Mason, if I remember correctly. Is it true that Saddam Hussein hated? Yeah, they hated each other, and if you that is true, Joey, definitely. But also, if you study it in depth, you find that all the different Muslim principalities hated each other to a certain extent. If America never killed him, then he would have kept alone. If people in check, then probably Afghanistan might. Yeah, who knows what the United States would have been able to do if they had just focused on nation building in only Afghanistan, where you didn't have a single dictator ruling like Saddam, Assad, Mubarak, Gaddafi, or the Shah. So who knows? What do you think of the war in Mazapan? I don't know enough about it to give an actual opinion. I'm going to be honest with you when you ask an honest question. U.S. troops, British troops were ordered forward to the Meuse River and stopped at SS Panzer Division. That sounds pretty successful. I don't know what Pollard was punished for. So William Bacon's rebellion entrenched slavery in America. The population of African slaves increased. Racial distinction. Yes, that is true, Shannon, because before then, indentured servitude and slavery were seen as hand in hand in the enterprise of colonial building. But the rebellion of indentured servants rebellion and then slave rebellions made it all the more clear that slavery was easier because they, couldn't leave. Montgomery was the one who planned the market garden. Yes, if I'm correct. I do my best. Yeah, I wouldn't say that. Most countries want autonomy and resent when stronger countries take charge and/or endorse certain regimes. That's true. Most countries want autonomy, but most countries don't want autonomy in the sense of choosing their own destiny. Autonomy means something very different in Afghanistan, Iran, and Iraq than it does in France, Britain, and the United States. It means in that region of the world, it means whichever strong man can assert power and rally the people and prove to be a good Muslim ruler, then he will be the one. Many of these places are Sunni Muslims, and in Sunni Islam, the best ruler is the one who follows Muhammad's teachings. And I think that sets up a line of strongmen. In Iran, the descendant of Muhammad must rule. And I think there is more of a strong man based on religious notions in the Middle East than there is in the Western world. And so their version of autonomy and not having other countries telling them what to do is very, very different. Yeah. Interesting. That is interesting. Thank you, Mason. I don't know enough about Pollard. Oh, so he was kind of like the Edward Snowden of his day. I don't know how much we should punish people who give away national secrets like that. I'm not sure. I don't quite like that. You're from London. Well, I'm glad you're here then, if you're from London. Um, Interesting. Oh, I'm so sorry. Seth, please feel better. I would hate for you to get sick, especially around Christmas. That's a terrible time to be sick. Please feel better. Thank you for joining us. Um, yeah, there was a cultural awakening that was commandeered by Islam and has led to, and the result, it's what do you replace it with? It's the huge question. But anyways, we are at 70 minutes. We've gone at 10 minutes extra because we've had such great conversations, and I've actually been able to keep up with the chat pretty good. And Simon, do you think the sound and the lighting was all good today, except for our flub up with with my background, with my light display here? I had to turn on the regular lights, the overhead. I read and I did everything I could. But yeah, I'm from the U.S. And this is the Friendly Neighborhood History Channel. And if you enjoyed what you have learned, like, subscribe, tell all your friends, family. Join us tomorrow and Monday. We've got 4 live streams this weekend into the week. Tomorrow I'll be doing my live stream about Christmas and its traditions, and then Monday I'm going to be talking about the Roman Empire as a makeup from a week ago. Um, yes, it's been a great live stream. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you so much, everyone who has joined us. Please like and subscribe, join the channel. Mason, I appreciate everything you have told me. You've told me things I didn't know, and I love it when people inform me about things. Um, but do you think General George Patton actually died in 5-mile-an-hour car, or do you think he was? I think there's a lot of questions about it, and I think there's a possibility of him being assassinated, especially when you consider all the conditions around his death. And yes, it's true. If I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for Rodolfo teaching me all of this and telling me what to say. And the times again, we've got tomorrow at noon Pacific, 3 Eastern, 8 p.m. in London. And then we've got Sunday, and then Monday we'll be back at 4 p.m. Eastern, 9 p.m. London time, 9 p.m. in Paris. So looking forward to that. Looking forward to everyone joining us. Like, subscribe, follow the channel, watch some stuff. Short form, long form, I've got it all. Look forward to videos on the history of Hanukkah and the history of Christmas coming out this week. I will be off on Christmas Day, but back at it with more live streams next week, and I hope you really enjoy it. Um, yeah, you can run that fast. Cheers from Alaska. Great to have you from here. You're an hour behind the Pacific, so you're at 4:18, I believe, or maybe you're 4 hours behind the East Coast. I'm trying to think about it exactly. There was minor crackling in the microphone at the beginning of the stream. Check my connections. Okay. I think that was just adjusting it. Global, is it there right now? I don't think it's there right now. I think it was just adjusting it and where to hold it. And that was when I was moving around a little bit. That just happens. But I think now it should be fine. So Global, can you let me know if it sounds good now? Um, all right. Well, thank you everyone so much for being here and joining us. I really appreciate all of you. Like and subscribe, become a friendly neighborhood historian. It's that easy, guys. And I look forward to seeing you on our live stream lecture tomorrow and then again on Monday. And maybe I'll switch it up. Maybe I'll do Christmas on Monday, and then tomorrow we'll talk about the Roman Empire. We'll do our makeup tomorrow, and then Monday will be the special. I mean, that's a special, an extra day, all of that fun stuff. Maybe you guys might like that more. It's really close to Christmas. So take care. And if I don't see all of you, have a wonderful Christmas. And if you don't partake, enjoy Hanukkah. Or if you don't partake at all, just enjoy this wintry season. and have a great night and take care. See you guys hopefully in the channel at some point. And hopefully that some point is tomorrow, 4 p.m. Eastern time, when I bring you some history for our live stream lecture. Good night and take care, everybody.